Back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. Let's talk to Nick Freeman, criminal defence lawyer, author and commentator, also known as Mr. Loophole, and a man who has been talking about e-scooters for quite some time and warning that they are not safe to be on the streets unregulated as they currently are. Nick, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, it's not like you want to say, I told you so, but you must be thinking that this morning.
Oh, heaven forbid. No, this was obvious, wasn't it? And what we're talking about at the moment is really the tip of the iceberg. Bearing in mind, you can't identify who's riding an e-scooter. And it's fascinating why the government allow retailers to sell something which is inherently illegal. You're allowed to use them only on private land. And I don't know how many of your listeners actually have private land which will be suitable for using e-scooters. I suspect very few. So surely it's the point of sale, isn't it? That's the starting point.
Yes.
And in my view, that should be, if someone's going to sell something that essentially is illegal, then it needs to be very heavily regulated. And then we need to know, and I've said this many, many times, at any one time, who is driving an e-scooter in the same way that we do with cyclists.
Yes.
And they do need to have some form of registration, tabard, or something to identify them in the same way that we do with cars. And then they're accountable because at the moment they buy with impunity, they ride with impunity, and, these things can go up to 60, 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
They're fraught with problems. And, as I think the headline in the newspaper said, this is the beginning of a crime wave. It really is. It's about to be unleashed.
Yeah.
And the government need to take urgent action. They're stepping into this with their eyes closed. They just don't seem to listen to what is essentially obvious. It's going to happen, and they need to do something about it now. Otherwise, it's going to be an unmitigated disaster. What they're doing is they're prioritising the green agenda. And there is a question mark about the green issues in relation to these e-scooters. We won't go into that now. But they're in such a hurry to have this sort of green footprint that they're jettisoning all other regulations and all other potential crimes because this is such an important issue.
Yes.
And they want to be seen to be the green government, and I understand that. But it doesn't need to be knee-jerk reaction. There needs to be proper consultation. It needs to be a considered response, and let's make it safe for everybody.
And this appears to be the new way of robbing people, doesn't it? Because we've all seen in European capitals sometimes people on the back of Lambrettas, snatching women's handbags, that kind of thing, knocking people over, stealing watches. We've had a bit of that here. But these e-scooters, because they're so easily obtained and you literally don't have to spend much money on them, you can be on one of those things this afternoon if you want, right? And one of the things that I find extraordinary is how big they are. I was walking out of this building, funnily enough, on Friday, and somebody had brought one in. It was orange. It wasn't black. Most of them are black. It was orange. I don't know whether it was a private one or not. But they're huge. They're really big.
They're big, and the wheels are too small, which makes them quite unstable. But Lambrettas, you can hear them. E-scooters, you don't hear them.
No.
So they have speed and stealth. So it's an ideal tool, isn't it, for committing crime, particularly in congested streets. And we have no police on our streets. We've said that for a long, long time. And even if we had police on the streets, even if we did, how are they going to deal with e-scooters? What are they going to do? Ride on the pavements? Are they going to have high-speed chases on the pavements? It's going to be far too dangerous. They're ideal for committing crime. They're ideal for escaping from the crime that they've committed. So that's why we need to make sure that these things, the people who are riding them, are identifiable at all times. Because I think what's happening at the moment is that the government are probably relying on the public to actually police the issue, and they can't police it unless they know who's riding.
Yes, and you've been attempting to get a sort of public debate going on this in all sorts of places, including in Parliament. Is there a thirst or even a need for that? I mean, will people listen to you?
I think it's starting. I think that there is a swell of opinion that's actually saying, why do we actually want e-scooters? Because, of course, cyclists, there's benefits. It's zero emission, no question, and also it's good for your health. E-scooters, well, there is a question mark over the carbon footprint, and of course, there's no benefit from an exercise perspective.
No.
And there's a huge downfall, a huge negative in terms of the road space they need and compliance with the law. I think what many people don't realise is that e-scooters are actually subject to exactly the same legislation as motor cars.
Yeah.
So that means there are drink drive limits. It means that there are speed limits. There are penalty point systems. You can go to prison if you hit someone. And so you've got serious laws in place, which is admirable. But if you can't enforce those laws because you don't know who's driving, it's rather like saying let's all drive cars without a registration plate. That in my view is the analogy, and that will be a ridiculous suggestion, and that is the situation that we're faced with now.
Well, I don't know if I told you this the last time we spoke about this particular subject, but I was driving in South London a couple of weeks ago, and there was a huge sort of phalanx of people coming towards me on e-scooters, something I'd never seen before, almost in formation. They were wearing crash helmets. It looked like a gang. They were all young men. You couldn't see their faces, and they were quite frightening, quite intimidating. If you've seen, and there was about 25 to 30 of them coming towards you, it's like watching a motorcycle gang.
And what's going to happen? How are you going to deal with that?
Yeah.
It's a difficult situation, and tragically, as you probably heard over the weekend, 14-year-old boy was murdered because somebody wanted his e-scooter.
Yeah.
So they're going to be like mobile phones, more valuable. They're going to be an object of desirability in certain areas with certain people, aren't they?
Yes, and there's a picture of a young boy in the paper today, Jamie Smith, aged 6, sent flying by a teenage rider said to be travelling at about 24 miles an hour outside his home in Leicester. And this is not just a London problem, it's in Leicester. There are reports from Norfolk, there are reports from all over the country. So this is a nationwide problem.
Yeah, it's a nationwide problem that's going to grow and grow and grow, and until the government step on it, it's obviously going to get worse, and it is going to be a serious problem. I mean, it's not just pedestrians. I mean, there's the balance perspective. I don't know whether you've driven one of these e-scooters. I have, and my balance is pretty good. And I was shocked at how difficult it is to actually balance on them. And if you do a bit of research, they say the wheel's too small.
Yeah.
They're obviously, even if they're used legally, you've got problems with the potholes or poor state of repair of the roads. And then you've got people who are just driving on the pavements and just basically doing what they want to do. And then, of course, you've got this crime wave that's beginning to be unleashed as well. So there's a huge area of problems here that needs to be grasped very quickly before it gets out of hand.
Yes.
And I think it's already on its way, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
I said to you initially, point of sale, why aren't they made illegal at this point of time so that the government can consider actually how to let these things gradually be introduced into
because that way the police could just confiscate them. They could be driving around in a van and they go, right, if you've got an illegal, unlicensed scooter, we're taking it. Just put it in the back of the van.
In essence, anything that's not one of the formal rental schemes is illegal. And the public could take the view, and because we see them wherever we go. In Manchester, the streets are full of e-scooters, and they're illegal.
Yeah.
And no one does anything about it. It's fascinating.
It really is quite extraordinary. Nick, thank you very much indeed. Nick Freeman, criminal defence lawyer, author and commentator, also known as Mr. Loophole, very sensibly has been calling for the regulation of these things for a very long time. I've been echoing that with him. Surely now is the time to get on with that. And if you're not going to regulate them, do make them illegal. It's all very well people saying, you can't make them illegal. People will just keep using them. Well, if you keep actually taking them, and if you confiscate them and put them in the back of a lorry and crush them, then I think you'll find that'll be the end of that.